The Awakening by Kate Chopin. Act 1. Late morning. We hear the surf, birds flying over. Someone is playing croquet in the distance. A piano lesson takes place off stage. Madame Lebrun brings coffee to Monsieur Ratignolle and his wife, Adele.
Some 50 miles south of New Orleans, where Barataria Bay opened its mouth into the Gulf of Mexico, was Grand Isle, Louisiana.
In former times, the house, as they called it, had been a summer luxury of the Lebrun family. Now, flanked by its dozen or more cottages,
which were always filled with exclusive visitors from the Quartier Français.
It enabled Madame Lebrun to maintain the easy and comfortable existence which appeared to be her birthright.
Raw! That's all right. Allez-vous-en! Raw!
A green and yellow parrot, which hung in a cage on the gallery of the main house, kept repeating over and over,
Allez-vous-en! Allez-vous-en! Sapristi! Raw! She could also speak a little Spanish.
and whistled her fluty notes out upon the breeze.
With maddening persistence.
Mr. Leonce Pontellier, unable to read his newspaper with any degree of comfort, walked across the narrow bridges which connected the Lebrun vacation cottages one with the other. The parrot was the property of...
Madame Lebrun?
and...
Mr. Pontellier has the privilege of quitting her society when she ceases to be entertaining.
He sat before his own cottage and once more applied himself to the task of reading Saturday's paper. The Sunday papers had not yet reached Grand Isle, and he glanced restlessly over the editorials and bits of news which he had not had time to read before quitting New Orleans the day before.
The Farival twins.
Were playing a duet from Zampa upon the piano. Farther out, under the water oaks playing croquet, were Mr. Pontellier's two children, Etienne and Raoul,
Sturdy little fellows.
of 4 and 5 years. Mr. Pontellier finally fixed his gaze upon a white sunshade that was advancing at a snail's pace from the beach. Beneath its pink-lined shelter were his wife, Mrs. Edna Pontellier, and young Robert Lebrun.
Si tu savais comme je t'aime, si tu savais comme je t'aime, bien sous toi-même, remémorer, bien sous, remémorer, si tu savais, si tu savais, si tu savais comme je t'aime.
Edna and Robert arrive at the cottage, collapsing before Leonce upon the step.
What folly, Edna, to bathe at such an hour and in such heat.
Mr. Pontellier exclaimed.
You are burnt beyond recognition.
He added, looking at his wife as one looks at a valuable piece of personal property which has suffered some damage.
Edna surveys her hands, which reminds her of her rings. She reaches out to Leonce, who, understanding, removes them from his vest pocket and drops them into her palm. Putting them on, Edna notices Robert watching her and laughs.
What is it?
Some utter nonsense.
Out in the water.
It does not seem.
Have some music.
When told, they realized this, and so did Mr. Pontellier.
I have a mind to go over to Klein's hotel and play a game of billiards. Come along, Lebrun.
I'd prefer to stay where I am and talk to Mrs. Pontellier.
Well, send him about his business when he bores you, Edna.
The Creole husband is never jealous.
Tout à fait.
With him, the gangrene passion is one which has become dwarfed by disuse.
Here, take the umbrella. Will you come back for dinner?
Perhaps not.
It all depends upon the company he finds over at Klein's and the size of the gang.
Leonce is gone. Edna and Robert are left alone.
They chatted incessantly about their amusing adventure out in the water.
It had again assumed its entertaining aspect.
About the wind, the trees, the people who had gone to the Chenier to hear Mass, about the Farival twins.
Who were now performing the overture to The Poet and the Peasant.
My son can always be counted on to talk a good deal about himself.
Well, now, he is very young.
And does not know any better.
Mrs. Pontellier talks very seldom about herself.
For the same reason.
Robert spoke of his intention to go to Veracruz in the autumn, where fortune awaited.
He is always intending to go to Mexico.
But some way, never got there.
Mrs. Pontellier talked about her father's Mississippi plantation and her girlhood home in...
The old Kentucky bluegrass country.
She read a letter from her sister who was away in the East.
And has engaged herself to be married.
You don't approve.
Nor do I disapprove. I just...
You just... Do you suppose Leonce will be coming back?
No. I suppose not. I had better go and dress for early dinner.
Edna goes. Having watched from afar, Adele takes Robert by the arm and they walk.
Do me a favor, Robert.
Granted. As many as you like.
I only ask for one. Let Mrs. Pontellier alone.
Adele Ratignolle, the embodiment of every womanly grace and charm, had been married 7 years. About every 2 years, she had a baby. At that time, she had 3 and was beginning to think of a 4th.
Tiens! Voilà que Madame Ratignolle est jalouse.
Nonsense! I'm in earnest. I mean what I say. Let Mrs. Pontellier alone.
It was your shadow I lived in once, and you were more than happy to...
Edna Pontellier is not one of us. She is not like us. She might make the unfortunate blunder of taking you seriously.
Why shouldn't she take me seriously? You Creoles. I have no patience with you. I hope Mrs. Pontellier does take me seriously. I hope she has discernment enough to find in me something besides un blagueur.
Enough, Robert. If your attentions to any married woman here were offered with the intention of being convincing, you would not be the gentleman we all know you to be and unfit to associate with the wives and daughters of the people who trust you.
You ought to feel that such things are not flattering to say to a fellow.
Should our whole intercourse consist of an exchange of compliments? Ma foi.
It isn't pleasant to have a woman tell you. You should have warned me against taking myself seriously. Your advice might then have carried some weight.
The young man strolled over toward the croquet game where he amused himself with the little Pontellier children.
Who were very fond of him.
It was 11 o'clock when Mr. Pontellier returned from Klein's in high spirits and awoke his wife. He talked to her while he undressed, telling her bits of news and gossip he had gathered during the day.
I find it very discouraging that my wife, the sole object of my existence, appears to have so little interest in the things which concern me, and values so little my conversation.
Did you remember the bonbons and peanuts?
What?
For the boys?
No, but I observed coming in that Raoul has a high fever and needs looking after.
I'm quite sure Raoul has no fever. He went to bed perfectly well and nothing ailed him all day.
I am too well acquainted with fever symptoms to be mistaken. I assure you the child is consuming at this very moment.
Leonce!
If it is not a mother's place to look after her children, whose on earth is it? I cannot make a living for the family on the street and stay home to see that no harm befalls them.
While she busied herself in the discovery that both children were sleeping soundly, Leonce descended into a deep and restorative sleep. Thoroughly awake, Mrs. Pontellier blew out the candle her husband had left burning and went down to the shore. She could not have told why she was crying. An indescribable oppression filled her whole being with a vague anguish. It was like a shadow, a mist passing across her soul's summer day.
Edna notices Adele sitting on the steps of her own cottage, smoking.
You're awake.
As are you. Of whom? Of what are you thinking?
Oh, nothing. But how stupid. It seems to me it is the reply we make instinctively to such a question.
I will let you off this time. It is really too late to think, especially to think about thinking.
The sight of the water stretching so far away, the wind beating my face, made me think of a certain summer day in Kentucky, of a meadow that seemed as big as the ocean to the very little girl walking through grass higher than her waist. She threw out her arms as if swimming, beating the tall grass as one strikes out in the water.
Where were you going that day in Kentucky walking through the grass?
I was just walking. I could see only green before me. Felt as if I must walk on forever without coming to the end of it. I don't remember whether I was frightened or pleased. Likely as not, it was Sunday and I was running away from the Presbyterian service, read in a spirit of gloom by my father that chills me yet to think of.
And have you been running from prayer ever since, ma chère?
On the contrary, religion took a firm hold upon me after I was 12 and until... well, I suppose until now, though I never thought much about it. Just driven along by habit. But sometimes, I feel this summer as if I were walking through that green meadow again, idly, aimlessly, unthinking and unguided.
Pauvre chérie.
My marriage to Leonce was purely an accident.
In this respect resembling many other happy marriages.
He fell in love.
As men are in the habit of doing.
And pressed his suit with an earnestness and ardor which left nothing to be desired. I fancied there was a sympathy of thought and taste between us. Add to this the violent opposition of my father and my sister Margaret to my marriage with a Catholic.
And we need seek no further for the motives which led you to accept Monsieur Pontellier for your husband.
As the devoted wife of a man who worshipped me, I felt I would take my place with a certain dignity in the world of reality.
Closing the portals forever behind you upon the realm of romance and dreams.
Naturally. I grew fond of Leonce, realizing with some satisfaction that no trace of passion or excessive and fictitious warmth colored that affection, thereby threatening its dissolution.
Edna.
I am fond of my children.
Of course you are.
Last year, they spent part of the summer with their grandmother in Iberville. It was the most secure I'd ever felt regarding their happiness and welfare. I did not entirely miss them. It seemed to free me from a responsibility which I had blindly assumed and for which fate had not fitted me. I would never sacrifice myself for my children or for anyone.
Edna, you can't be serious. If I thought you really...
I would give up the unessential. I would give up my money. I would give up my life for my children. But I wouldn't give myself. I'm sorry, I can't make it more clear. It's only something which I am beginning to comprehend.
I don't know what you would call the essential, or what you mean by the unessential, but a woman who would give her life for her children could do no more than that. Your Bible tells you so. I'm sure I couldn't do more than that.
Oh, yes, you could.
Edna, you must listen to me now.
Adele.
Go to your husband.
Here I am,
Adele.
Alphonse. I suggest you do the same. Ma foi.
The next morning,
Victor, carrying Leonce's luggage, complains to Madame Lebrun about the hour.
Mr. Pontellier was up in good time to take the steamer to the wharf.
He is returning to the city to his brokerage business, Victor, with the other dutiful and prosperous husbands and fathers.
We will not see you again till Saturday?
Looking forward to a lively week in Carondelet Street, you know. Here, I want you to take half of the winnings I brought away from Klein's.
It will buy a handsome wedding present for Sister Janet.
We'll treat Sister Janet better than that, my dear.
Mr. Pontellier was a great favorite, and ladies, men, and children were always on hand to say goodbye to him as he disappeared down the sandy road.
Mr. Pontellier is the best husband in the world.
Mrs. Pontellier was forced to admit
I know of none better.
It was a difficult matter to define, to my own satisfaction, wherein my wife failed in her duty toward our children. Something better felt than perceived, and never voiced without subsequent regret and ample atonement. If one of the boys took a tumble whilst at play, he was not apt to rush, crying, to his mother's arms for comfort. He would more likely wipe the water out of his eyes and the sand out of his mouth and go on playing. Edna was not a mother woman. The mother women seemed to prevail that summer at Grand Isle, fluttering about with extended protecting wings when any arm, real or imaginary, threatened their precious brood. They idolized their children, worshipped their husbands, and esteemed it a holy privilege to efface themselves as individuals.
Leonce is gone. Robert and Edna are left alone.
Are you going bathing?
Oh, I think not.
You? Do you look different today? I thought we might try another lesson in the water.
Oh, I'm hopeless, aren't I? I thought by now you'd have tired of watching me flounder.
Never.
She watches him walk into the water.
Do I really look different today?
I asked you, remember?
You might say a certain light is beginning to dawn dimly within me.
Is that so, Mrs. Pontellier?
Robert swims out of earshot.
The light which, showing the way, forbids it.
It was Saturday evening, a few weeks after, and an unusual number of husbands and fathers had come down to stay over Sunday. The children were sent to bed, having been permitted to sit up till after the ice cream, which naturally marked the limit of human indulgence. After Mrs. Pontellier had danced twice with her husband and once with Robert, she went out on the gallery of the main house, where she could look toward the Gulf.
Mademoiselle Rice, a homely woman in all black who limps and wears fake violets in her wig, sits near the piano.
Would you like to hear Mademoiselle Rice play?
Of course, but...
I'll ask her. I'll tell her that you want to hear her. She likes you.
Robert hurries over to Mademoiselle Rice.
Ask Mrs. Pontellier what she would like to hear me play, Robert.
I would not dare to choose, and pray that Mademoiselle Rice would please herself in her selection.
The very first chords which struck upon the piano sent a keen tremor down Edna's spine. It was not the first time she had heard an artist at the piano. Perhaps it was the first time her being was tempered to take an impress of the abiding truth. She waited in vain for the material pictures which she thought would gather and blaze before her imagination. She saw no pictures of solitude, of hope, of longing, or of despair. But the very passions themselves were aroused within her soul, swaying it, lashing it as the waves daily beat upon her splendid body. She trembled, she was choking, and the tears blinded her.
Mademoiselle Rice stops before Edna on her way out.
Well, how did you like my music?
Edna takes Mademoiselle Rice's hand in her own and squeezes it.
You are the only one worth playing for. Those others? Bah.
Mademoiselle Rice limps back to her cottage. The spell is broken.
Oh, what an artiste! What passion!
I have always said no one could play Chopin like Mademoiselle Rice.
That last prelude, bon Dieu!
It shakes a man.
Robert proposed a bath, and there was not a dissenting voice. He did not lead the way, however, but loitered behind.
There is a band playing down at Klein's.
And the strains came faintly tempered by the distance.
No weight of darkness.
No shadows.
The white light of the moon had fallen upon the world like the mystery and the softness of sleep. Most of them walked into the water as though into a native element. The sea was quiet now and swelled lazily in broad billows that melted into one another and did not break except upon the beach in little foamy crests that coiled back like slow white serpents.
My wife has attempted all summer to learn to swim. She has received instructions from both the men and women, in some instances from the children.
Robert has pursued a system of lessons almost daily.
But that night, Edna was like the little stumbling, clutching child who all of a sudden realizes its powers and walks for the first time alone, boldly and with overconfidence. She could have shouted for joy, as with a sweeping stroke or two she lifted her body to the surface of the water. A feeling of exultation overtook her, as if some power of significant import had been given her to control the working of her body and her soul.
Good show, darling.
Edna, that's the way.
How easy it is! It is nothing! Why did I not discover before that it was nothing?
Her unlooked-for achievement was the subject of wonder, applause, and admiration. Each one congratulated themselves that their special teachings had accomplished this desired end.
I want to swim far out, where no woman has swum before.
She would not join the group in their sports and bouts, but intoxicated with her newly conquered power, swam out alone. She turned her face seaward to gather in an impression of space and solitude, reaching out for the unlimited in which to lose herself.
Edna begins to struggle with the waves farther out and strains to finally regain the shore, where Leonce and the others await her.
I thought I should have perished out there alone.
You are not so very far, my dear. I was watching you.
Edna, you were brilliant.
I'm ready to go home.
But we just came down, Edna.
Edna turns and goes. Leonce does not follow. Robert catches up with her.
Edna, will you wait?
Did you think I was afraid?
No. I know you weren't.
Then why did you come? Why didn't you stay out there with the others?
I never thought of it.
Thought of what?
Of anything. What difference does it make?
I'm very tired.
I know you are.
You don't know anything about it. 1,000 emotions have swept through me tonight. I don't comprehend half of them. I wonder if any night on Earth will ever again be like this one. It is like a night in a dream. There must be spirits abroad.
There are. Didn't you know this was the 28th of August?
The 28th of August?
Yes. On the 28th of August, at the hour of midnight, a spirit that has haunted these shores for ages rises from the Gulf. With his own penetrating vision, the spirit seeks a mortal worthy to hold him company, worthy of being exalted into the realms of the semi-celestials. His search has always hitherto been fruitless, and he has sunk back, disheartened into the sea. But tonight he found Mrs. Pontellier.
They arrive at the cottages and Edna takes a hammock.
I'll stay out here. Good night.
Shall I get you a pillow?
There's one here.
The children have been tumbling it about.
No matter.
Shall I stay with you till Mr. Pontellier comes?
If you wish. Don't swing the hammock. Will you get my white shawl which I left on the windowsill over at the house?
Are you chilly?
No, but I shall be. Presently.
Presently? How long do you plan to stay out here?
I don't know. Will you get the shawl?
Of course. Did you say I should stay till Mr. Pontellier came back?
I said you might, if you wish to.
Let us go to Grande-Terre tomorrow.
What shall we do there?
Climb up the hill to the old fort and look at the little wriggling gold snakes and watch the lizards sun themselves. And the next day or the next, we can sail to the Bayou Brulot.
What shall we do there?
Anything. Cast bait for fish.
No. We'll go back to Grande-Terre. Let the fish alone.
Wherever you like. We shall not need anyone. I'll take you some night in the pirogue when the moon shines. Maybe your Gulf spirit will whisper to you in which of these islands the treasures are hidden. Direct you to the very spot, perhaps.
And in a day we should be rich. I'd give it all to you, the pirate gold and every bit of treasure we could dig up. I think you would know how to spend it. Pirate gold isn't a thing to be hoarded or utilized. It is something to squander and throw to the four winds for the fun of seeing the golden specks fly.
Robert sits in silence and watches Edna watching him. The throbbing of desire between them builds until voices are heard off and Robert disappears.
What are you doing out here, Edna? I thought I should find you in bed. Are you asleep?
No.
Do you know it is past 1 o'clock? Come now. Edna!
Don't wait for me.
You will take cold out here. What folly is this? Why don't you come in?
It isn't cold. I have my shawl.
Leonce storms into their cottage. Mademoiselle Rice watches from her own.
Another time she would have, through habit, yielded to his desire. Not with any sense of submission or obedience to his compelling wishes, but unthinkingly, as we walk, move, sit, stand, go through the daily treadmill of the life which has been portioned out to us.
Edna? Dear? Are you not coming in soon?
No. I'm going to stay out here.
This is more than folly. I can't permit you to stay out here all night. You must come in the house instantly.
Leonce, go to bed. I don't wish to go in, and I don't intend to. Don't speak to me like that again. I shall not answer you.
Mr. Pontellier prepared for bed, but slipped on an extra garment and opened a bottle of wine. He drank a glass on the gallery, offering one to his wife. He proceeded to smoke 2 cigars and then drank another glass of wine. Watching him fume, Edna began to feel reality pressing into her soul. The exuberance which had sustained and exalted her spirit left her helpless and yielding to the conditions which crowded her in.
Finally, Edna climbs out of the hammock.
Are you coming in, Leonce?
Yes, dear. Just as soon as I have finished my cigar.
The sun rises and begins to set. The hotel guests are having a large argument around the table at the main house. Edna, late in joining for dinner, hurries to the table.
I apologize for missing the dinner call, Madame Lebrun.
Robert is going to Mexico.
Edna looks across the table at Robert, who smiles uneasily.
When is he going?
Tonight.
Be sensible, Robert.
This very
What
evening.
possesses him?
Sure, let him fly away.
But that's impossible! How can a person start off from Grand Isle to Mexico at a moment's notice? As if he were going over to Klein's or the wharf or down to the beach.
I said all along I was going to Veracruz. I've been saying so for years.
Robert, you cannot be serious.
Please.
Please, let Robert explain why he is going and why he is going tonight. Really, this table is getting to be more and more like Bedlam every day, with everybody talking at once. Sometimes I hope God will forgive me, but positively, sometimes I wish, Victor, that you would lose the power of speech.
Thank you, Mother, for your holy wish. But I fail to see the benefit to anybody, except it might afford you a more ample opportunity to talk yourself.
Madame Lebrun, forgive me for saying so, but your Victor should have been taken out mid-ocean in his earliest youth and drowned.
Ah, there would be more logic in disposing of old people with an established claim for making themselves universally obnoxious.
Damn it, Victor!
Robert?
Let them both
Is that
sing.
any way to speak before a woman in my condition?
Enough! Robert, explain.
There is nothing much to explain, Mother.
But when did you make up your mind to all this?
Last night. This morning.
The table erupts into another round of protests.
Have you all gone mad? At what time do you leave?
At 9. Baudelaire wants to wait for the moon.
Are you all ready to go?
Quite ready? I shall only take my hand back and will pack my trunk in the city.
Edna abruptly leaves the table. Adele rises to pursue her but sits back down when Robert follows suit. He finds Edna perched on the step of her cottage.
Si tu savais comme je t'aime. Si tu savais comme je t'aime.
Are you going right away?
In 20 minutes?
He puts on his hat and nervously takes it off again, wiping his face with his handkerchief.
Take the fan.
Thank you, but it does no good. You have to stop fanning some time and feel all the more uncomfortable afterward.
That's one of the ridiculous things which men always say. I have never known one to speak otherwise of fanning.
I'm sorry.
How long will you be gone?
Forever. Perhaps. I don't know. It depends upon a good many things.
Well, in case it shouldn't be forever, how long will it be?
I don't know.
This seems to me perfectly... I don't like it. I don't understand your motive for silence and mystery, never saying a word to me about this last night, about anything.
They look helplessly into one another's eyes. Edna with longing and hurt. Robert with sadness and guilt.
Don't part from me in any ill humor. I never knew you to be out of patience with me before.
I don't want to part in any ill humor, but can't you understand? I've grown used to seeing you, to having you with me all the time. And your action seems unfriendly, even unkind. You don't even offer an excuse for it. Why, I was just thinking about how pleasant it would be to see you in the city next winter.
So was I. Perhaps.
Robert suddenly stands.
Goodbye, my dear Mrs. Pontellier. Goodbye. You won't. I hope you won't completely forget me.
Write to me when you get there, won't you, Robert?
He nods, attempting a smile before walking away. Mademoiselle Rice approaches.
Will you miss your friend greatly?
Oh, mademoiselle, is it you? Are you coming down to bathe?
Why should I come down to bathe at the very end of the season when I haven't been in the surf all summer?
I beg your pardon.
Edna?
All my life, I have long been accustomed to harboring thoughts and emotions which never voice themselves. They belong to me. When do you leave, mademoiselle?
A week from Monday. And you?
The following Monday. It has been quite a pleasant summer, has it not?
Edna walks into the moonlit water. As she swims away from the shore, the scene transforms into the dining room of the Pontellier residence several months later.
Mr. Pontellier possessed a very charming home on Esplanade Street in New Orleans. On Tuesday afternoons, Tuesday being Mrs. Pontellier's reception day, there was a constant stream of callers. Women who came in carriages or streetcars, or walked when the air was soft and distance permitted. Mrs. Pontellier, attired in a handsome reception gown, typically remained in the drawing room the entire afternoon receiving her visitors. This had been the program which she had religiously followed since her marriage 6 years before.
Edna and Leonce sit facing one another across the dinner table.
Tired out, Edna? Whom did you have today? Many callers?
There were a good many. I found their cards when I got home. I was out.
Out? Why, what could have taken you out on Tuesday? What did you have to do?
Nothing. I simply felt like going out, and I went out.
Well, I hope you left some suitable excuse.
No, I left no excuse. I told Celestine to say I was out, that was all.
Why, my dear, I should think you'd understand by this time that people don't do such things. We've got to observe les convenances if we ever expect to keep up with the procession. If you felt that you had to leave home this afternoon, you should have left some suitable explanation for your absence. Oh, this soup is really impossible. It's strange that woman hasn't learned yet to make a decent soup. Was Mrs. Belthrop here?
I don't remember who was here.
Edna fetches the tray of ladies' visiting cards and puts it down in front of Leonce.
The Mrs. Delicidas. I worked a big deal in futures for their father this morning. Nice girls. It's time they were getting married. Mrs. Belthrop. I tell you what it is, Edna. You can't afford to snub Mrs. Belthrop. Why, Belthrop could buy and sell us 10 times over. His business is worth a good round sum to me. You'd better write her a note.
Mercy! Why are you making such a fuss over it?
I'm not making any fuss, but it's just such seeming trifles that we've got to take seriously. Such things count. This fish is scorched.
I don't mind a little scorch.
It seems to me we spend money enough in this house to procure at least one meal a day, which a man could eat and retain his self-respect.
You used to think the cook was a treasure.
Perhaps when she first came. But cooks are only human. They need looking after like any other class of persons that you employ.
Leonce could see plainly that she was not herself. That is, he could not see that she was becoming herself, and daily casting aside that fictitious self which we assume like a garment with which to appear before the world.
Fuming, Leonce stands to go.
Where are you?
I'm going to get my dinner at a club. It sometimes enters my mind to wonder if my wife might be growing a little unbalanced mentally.
Astonished, Edna watches him go. Once alone, she takes off her wedding ring and places it gently onto the floor. She then stomps on it several times in a sudden outburst of rage and grief. After taking a moment to collect herself, she picks up the ring and puts it back on her finger. Taking a seat, she resumes her dinner.